This conference will now be recorded.
Awesome. Good morning and welcome to the virtual BrainTrust. I have on with us today one of my good friends, Bill Patton. One of the things I love about you, Bill, is that you are truly a maverick in the sport that we love called tennis. And it's interesting to me that you published the Athlete-Centered Coach and you're working hard to influence sports culturally globally. There's a revolution going on in coaching, and Bill's always had the colored outside the lines, that is for sure. So he's ready to set new lines and to be drawn. He used to take his toys apart and see how they work. Bill, you've got a very big resume, everything from a USPTA elite professional, PTR, and MTM professional. Tell us a little bit about how you got here and then what you're going to teach us today.
Well, I think probably the most important part of my story is the fact that I was in a pretty catastrophic car accident in 2010, which left me with a pretty bad case of whiplash and a concussion to the point where, I was having all of the worst of the concussion syndrome that you can have, from migraines to just being really foggy for about 6 months, and a loss of emotional control, which really sent me and my life kind of into a bit of a downward spiral. So in the midst of that, I had this opportunity to kind of rebuild my life, and I started reading more stuff about mindset. So during that time, I started to come to the realization that I had these deep-seated beliefs about who I was and what coaching's all about. And, I wasn't far off, but I was off just enough that I was kind of making myself miserable. So, since 2010, I've just really been now on a path of being even more mindful than I was before. I always felt like I wanted to get better all the time, and I was always looking for a competitive edge and trying to be better than the other guy or gal. But after the accident, I started taking it more in a kind of like long-term legacy perspective of where do I want to end up at, when I'm done.
Yeah. Well, I love that you just brought that up because mindset's a big thing right now. Obviously, it's St. Patrick's Day. Most of the bars are closed. Most of, the country clubs are closed. A lot of people are kind of wondering what to do, right? And so how can you take what we're going to learn today, let's say this lesson of mindset, to where people are at right now in their homes, in this quarantine, in this moment?
Yeah, and when you presented this opportunity to speak, I jumped on it. I was like, me first. Yeah.
Well,
So
I appreciate you for that.
yeah, I saw the sheet, I saw the blank sheet, and I saw my name going on first, and I was very happy about that. So no, I'm really all over the topic. So it is an interesting thing because coaches, among all walks of life, all what's the word, types of work that you do, vocations and avocations.
Okay.
Coaches are among the most influential people in life. So if you look at a high school coach, if they're spending 4 years with the athlete, they're, and multiple seasons and a lot of time on task, that's a lot of face time. It's a lot of influence time, and I think that's why people have a very strong connection with coaches.
Yeah.
So during a time like this, it might be good to connect with an old coach and get their perspective on things. I think it's an interesting time to take the principles that we've been teaching and apply them to this situation where we're in. We have an opportunity to stop, reevaluate, and take things to a different level. It's really maybe this could be the only time we ever get to do this as a society together.
Yeah, I was thinking about that last night. I'm like, when are we ever going to get a 2 week stop for recovery, for rest, for prep? I mean, if, for athletes out there right now that have lost their senior season or maybe couldn't compete in the tournament and now they're wondering what next. And it's like all of these works and all these characteristics that you teach in the athlete-centered coach are principles that they can be applying right now to actually propel them when we get out of this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the word crisis in Chinese crudely translates to opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anytime we're facing adversity, our first reaction is to think, okay, that's a bad thing, and I hate it, and I want to avoid the negativity that comes with that. But when we begin to embrace adversity and say, okay, what's the lesson here? God, what do you have for me?
Yeah.
I mean, and part of what I want to get into during this talk is a little bit about the spiritual, because one thing that I find among top athletes and top coaches is they have an ethic of some type. And you'll see many professional athletes, are born again Christians, and some are Muslim and some are, Hindu or, Buddhist or whatever, or they are really strong, humanists, and they believe in the human spirit and whatever, but they have a belief system in place. And I think that having a belief system, something that is an organized way of ordering your worldview, it creates a stronger foundation for how you're going to pursue all that other stuff, and it also helps keep it in perspective. I am not at all worried or upset about what we're going through right now, and it has a lot to do with what I believe. That here's an opportunity. Everybody's got to stop. Now we've got a chance to be mindful, reflective, think back on what have been the good things that we've done in the past, look for areas where we can improve. And right now at this moment, I mean, we could move forward from here and say, all right, we can get a handle on this crazy parent syndrome, the helicopter parents. We can get a handle on, or start to, and we can also maybe create more friction for over-the-top coaches who are doing things that are not developmentally appropriate with their athletes.
Well, let's go into that. I think that's a good segue into kind of this topic in your book. Obviously, in the background, you've got the athlete-centered coach. Let's talk about the 5 characteristics, and then we can go a little bit back and forth over that.
The funny thing is I realized that I didn't get my notes out. I have to look at what that list is again. But I remember the first one off the top of the head. So I hope if I go into my iPad here, it won't disrupt the video. But the first characteristic number 1, which I find to be a fundamental thing. I mean, without number 1, you can't do the other ones.
Yeah.
It's just not really possible. So I want to set it up that way. But the first thing about an athlete-centered coach is that they see the athletes differently than people who are somewhat less athlete-centered. And I want to say that there's a continuum. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, over here you have people who are maximally athlete-centered, right? And then over here you have people who are most of the way there, and that's probably me, because what I'm going to be talking about is some really idealistic stuff.
Yeah.
So the last thing I would want people to do is to say I'm there, because I'm not there. But so these are ideals that we're going after. And then there are people who think they're athlete-centered, but really they're not, because they're really thinking about themselves a little bit too much. And then you have all the crazy people over there.
Cool. So, in a
so
quick nutshell,
characteristic. You know, after that, lengthy setup, and
Well, it's
it's
okay.
probably
Define athlete-centered coach for the audience so they know from your perspective what an athlete-centered coach is.
okay, and it's pretty simple. I mean, the athlete-centered coach puts the athlete before themselves. The
Yeah.
priority, all the focus is on the athlete and what does it take for them to succeed, and for the long term, for their long-term holistic health and safety and success, not just the short-term successes of today, which people have to pay a price for later. So, so characteristic number one is that the athlete-centered coach sees themselves as being a part of the athlete's timeline rather than an athlete existing on the coach's timeline. And so we see a lot of programs that are good, successful programs that people praise mightily, and people enter that timeline. But I assure you, many, many athletes exit that timeline and no one takes notice of the fact that they're gone.
Yeah.
So we have these programs, and I'm not going to name names on that, but I'm sure you can imagine. It doesn't take long to think about what these programs are and where they are and who they're affiliated with and whatnot. But it's like a big machinery. It's machinery, and I used to see myself this way as a piece of machinery. The raw materials come in, we crank them out, we get the dingleberries off, and we send it out as a finished product.
Mm-hmm.
And some soft goods get ground up in the machinery every once in a while.
Yeah.
And that's just the cost of doing business. Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry you had to have your leg amputated.
That's not the best analogy for it. No,
I think this is perfect. Okay, so Oakland Raiders had a guy named Kurt Marsh, drafted him high, great offensive lineman. Had a horrific ankle injury, misdiagnosed, treated with painkillers. Basically his ankle turned into a degenerative problem very fast.
Yeah.
And then years he had to have his lower leg amputated. And when Al Davis was asked later about Kurt Marsh, he said this, and maybe this is true or maybe this is not true, but people think like this. He said, "It's too bad Kurt didn't work out. It's too bad Kurt Marsh didn't work out." And see, that's the commodity aspect of coaching. Too bad for Kurt, right? Meanwhile, Kurt's like, "Well, I've had my leg amputated, so."
Well, that's an interesting concept because especially when you look at football and some of these other professions, they're owner driven, right? So it's not really like R&D driven or player driven. It's very owner driven. So we tend to see that sometimes where it is a commodity versus allowing that athlete to be able to flourish. And we don't hear about the athlete that stays with the organization anymore like they used to like 10, 15, 20 years ago, to where there was like loyalty and legacy within that system. Within that principle that you just talked about, how do you see that changing in tennis and let's just say sport overall, and hopefully the next 5 and 10 years?
Well, let's go back to football because that was football of the 80s, right? And I think that football is slowly becoming more careful about the health of their athletes. Slowly. I mean, there's still like rampant painkiller abuse and whatnot, but football, because of the unions and the players, I think former players are starting to really speak up, and their voice is being heard, and they're saying, all right, our long-term health and happiness is as important or more important than any money or glory that we gain in the short term.
Yeah, I think that's a principle I think is going around the globe right now, worldly, with even regular people working day to day. I think that's people are starting to say, like, look, I matter, right? Like, and I want to make a change, and I want to be involved, and I want to be, the best person that I can be, but I also want to be able to have that support so I can grow in whatever it is, whether I'm in a corporation or I'm in small business or, I'm playing golf or I'm playing tennis. it really doesn't matter. What's great about everything that I see that you do, Bill, is that you can take these principles and we can apply them across the board to life. And that's really why I was excited to get you on here today, is because taking these principles that you're talking about and now applying them to daily life is what I'm hoping that people will gain from being a part of BrainTrust, being a part of, following people, or getting people to finally have a passion inside that they can come out and teach. Because there's a lot of people that need that right now. So with that, like, where are we going on the second principle?
Can you still see me on your camera?
I lost you. It says pause.
I'm trying to find my notes here. So
That's okay.
so let's see. Dun, 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 dun. All right.
Well, before you get that, let me ask you another real quick question. What got you motivated to actually write these books? Like, what drove that? What was that deepness inside you that got yourself to finally say, you know what, I'm going to pull the trigger, I'm going to sit down, and I'm going to put this on paper? Because there's people out there right now, they're sitting at home maybe, that are your friends or your followers, or maybe like within another area, that they have something that they can put down on paper that they can share with the world. Like, what was it that finally just said, you know what, Bill, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do it?
Well, I mean, it goes back to the car accident because,
Yeah.
I realized, I could have been killed in that accident. So I think, when and then, when you encounter your own mortality, and we can really stop and think about mortality at this time. I mean, the death rate's still 100%. And how do you want to be remembered in life? I mean, this is one of the 7 habits of highly effective people, is they begin with the end in mind, right? Think about the legacy that you want to leave behind. And so one thing that I had as a goal that I really wanted to make sure that I got done was to write a book. And so right around 2011, I started to realize that because of the work that I was doing with shifting my mindset and how I was incorporating that in my tennis lessons, someone turned to me, one of my lady clients said, "Wow, you're like a life coach on the tennis court." And I was like, "Oh, wow." I mean, because I've been studying from these life coaches, and then I was becoming that. And then in 2011, I shared with a former friend that my goal was to become a thought leader in sports, and especially tennis. And he scoffed at that, and his his attitude was that was the most arrogant thing he'd ever heard of. And I'm like, and I'm thinking, well, all right, that's you. I mean, I don't know why you're reacting that way, but to me, it's like, okay, I share my thoughts. People like them and find inspiration and value in them. I guess that makes me a thought leader.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's ego driven, it's kind of a weird thing. But if your mindset is that you want to be of service and you want to help and you have the skill and you can use it and people like it, then do it. And
I would absolutely agree with you on that, 100%. I think
yeah.
too many times people worry about what others are thinking or saying, right? That it
Yeah,
cripples them.
I really don't care what anybody thinks of me.
I really wish you could teach us that right there. If you could teach everybody that, Bill, you'd be a multimillionaire.
Yeah, well, for a long time, I've been teaching teenagers that the other teenagers are thinking about the zit on their nose.
Yeah.
They're not looking at your zit. They're completely focused on their own zit. Don't worry about it.
I like that.
Yeah. No, so okay, now, so back to number 1 again for a moment, because I did look at my notes for a second there and I got what I needed. But it's about long-term life skills. Are we building into the athletes what they need for their life, right? And a lot of parents and a lot of kids will cooperate with you on that. Some will resist you on that. Some will think that's the strangest thing they've ever heard of. You're only supposed to coach the sport and make me better at kicking this ball past the goalie top shelf, right? That's your only job. Stay in your lane, mister, right? So if you go out of your way to become a truly athlete-centered coach, don't think you're going to win the popularity contest. You
Wow.
will probably find more resistance when you try to walk this path. But,
Yeah,
and I don't know how many times I've been in coach meetings where I have to remind people this. Hey, everybody, isn't it all about the kids?
yeah.
This has happened maybe 20 times in my career where I've had to remind the adults that we're here for the best interest of the athletes, because they're not thinking that way. And all the athletes, not just the elite private school that wants to get their way because their kids are privileged,
Yeah.
and not just for the inner city kids who might be feeling entitled another way. It's for everybody. What we have to come up with, our job as coaches and as a group and as an organization, is to come up with the greatest good for the highest level, for the most
Mm.
educational value, so that we can go forward. Now here I was afraid we weren't going to fill up time, and now look where we are, right? So,
Whenever you get together, I'm always grateful. So this is awesome. Thank you.
all right, should we go on to number 2?
Sure. And we can go wherever we need to.
All right. So, it's a perfect time to talk about it too, because of what we've just been talking about, is that coaches athlete-centered coaches are not doing it because of their ego.
Yeah.
So and if the word ego is really interesting, because I was a psych major, and the word ego is really a clinical term. It doesn't have a lot of connotations with it. It's just simply your self concept. Who do you think you are? I mean, that's all it is. That's your ego.
Yeah.
But if you look at the Urban Dictionary, then that will tell you that ego is a bad thing, and ego's connotation to most people is that ego is a bad thing, because ego means too large of an ego. I mean, it could even be megalomaniac or what have you. But so you have a self concept. Excellent. Okay, so but your self concept is not necessarily important to the athlete. So what are we doing to help the athlete grow in their self-concept?
Yep.
What are we doing to help them become more and better and stronger and more whole as people through the incredible process, through the credible tool of competition and training and teamwork? There's so many different amazing outcomes that come out of sporting as a microcosm for life.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the reasons I think that I love being around sports so much, is because I get to kind of live in these multiple parallel universes with different people with these different ideas and theories on life. And so, especially when you travel the world and you start to see a lot of different philosophies and cultures. And it's interesting to me that you brought up earlier, especially in the last point, about coaches being so focused on just getting the people through, right? I think, like, what do you think the busyness is in coaching now compared to what it used to be? Do you think that we've shifted from maybe an athlete-centered coach back in the day, and now because of business and like ideas of how to profit or how to get as many people through has changed that? Or do you think that we're kind of in this unique, like, metaphysical transformation right now?
I see it happening very slowly, but it is happening. More people are willing to talk about it. So, okay, I am a member of something called Omni Athlete, the Future of Sport, and I strongly recommend that everybody look into that. And so that is a great, great source for this transformation that's going on. The people who founded that were essentially the founders of the field of sports psychology before it even had a name.
Yeah.
And so we're the original woo-woo, that's weird. And then, I mean, even into the 80s and early 90s, sports psychology was not necessarily fully accepted right? But now look where we are. I mean, most everybody's got some kind of mental training coach.
Yeah.
So, um, so it's taken a long, long time for that to gain acceptance, but the field of sports psychology even has its problems when it's focused solely on performance. When it's the only focus of sports psychology is to help you play better so that you can win today, then it's not all that it could be.
Yeah.
Because it could be a lot more about also giving back to society and creating a legacy moving forward. I had a chance to meet a former Oakland Raider player who was getting really involved in developing educational opportunities in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was very busy with that. It was growing. He was getting excited about it. He was contemplating retirement from the NFL, but then out of practicality, he continued playing football because he could make a lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
And he was good at it. And he didn't sacrifice his NFL career, but he was confronted by the then general manager of the team to say, hey, all that altruistic stuff, everybody loves you, we admire that and whatnot, but you might want to focus on your career.
Yeah.
And so he said that was pretty much the time that he realized he would look into free agency and go to another team, which
Mm-hmm.
he did. And they would sort of accept him that way. And then he didn't last much longer. He probably could have played, 3-5 more years, but he left that in order to pursue his dream.
Yeah. Well, I think that's the key too, is I think on both sides of this sometimes though, because you can have an athlete that maybe they want to go into a program that has the expectation of, look, we're only going for the W, right? Like that's all you want. That's where it's driven, the expectations set. I think the biggest thing that I see with coaches is that when they don't set the platform, right, or the expectations of what they think and what the athlete thinks, and that tends to get kind of blurry, especially when you're trying to make something happen. Is this really just about the W's? Because if it is, there's some great coaches out there that they're really good at getting that, right?
Yeah.
But if this is about making you a great human being, here's the other things that we're going to do and how we're going to work with those, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Like there was a national championship coach who they asked him, what do you think of your team? And he said, I'll tell you in 20 years because I want to see what they become.
I love that.
So anyway, another interesting thing. I mean, I had this one team that of girls that I love these girls a lot. They were so great, and we went into the playoffs as a 10 seed, and we pull the 10-7 upset, and so now we pull 2, right? And so my girls, everybody played to the maximum. They were all great, and we pulled this upset up, beating the number 2 seeds, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm like, I didn't hit a ball.
Yeah.
And then, it's third set tiebreaker, in doubles, and the win is secured, and now they're dogpiling, and I have a decision to make: get involved or walk away.
Ooh.
And I walked away. I mean, I went and I cried my way over to the bathroom.
Wow.
It hit me, and I was like, no, coaching can be humiliating.
Yeah.
Because it's their glory, and it's inappropriate for the coach to bask in their glory. I mean, it's a tremendous honor and a privilege to participate in that, but I get to tell the story.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the coolest.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I've always found interesting is like if you go to the Olympics, right? Whether you're on the medical staff, the coaching staff, the support staff, you don't ever put the Olympic medal on because it's not you that got that Olympic medal. You're the support system, right? And that's one of the lessons that I learned from somebody in sports medicine way back is they're like, Sean, like unless you're about the athlete and you're there for them to succeed at no matter cost, like you've got to humble yourself and say, look, if maybe if what you're doing isn't working, you got to be humble enough to be like, who can I get to help this person, even if it's not about me. And that's a really good point that you just brought up about you stepping away, because I see, and I've been a part of this on both sides. So I can say that, if from your definition of athlete center to where obviously in the middle and maybe a little bit further to the right, I've kind of been in all those places in teaching, education, and coaching. But one thing that I will say as an athlete is one of the greatest things that I loved with winning a championship, or maybe not winning, but maybe doing my best in a PR, is having that coach there to celebrate that with. Because what that person did is maybe they substituted a father figure, or a mother figure, or an uncle figure, something in your life that maybe was missing. And because they were there, they helped you to become who you are. And so for me, it was like when we did win state in cross country, for instance, right? It was amazing to see my coach waiting there at the very end as we like basically dropped in like this, 85, degree humidity weather in, rain in Titusville, Florida. To see him like look up and just know like you did your best, and I'm really proud of you. And all this like year and a half that we did preparing in the mountains and going here and flying here for elevation training, it all came down to this moment. But at the end of it, I really feel he was the coach that said, let me see you in 20 years. Because what he did, and what I can truly say, is the top 5 runners in our sport of our team all became doctors of some sort. The 6th runner, let's just put it this way, became an aeronautical engineer and went into the Army. It's like an awesome, like just amazing individual. And then our 7th one owns his own business in like multiple different facets. And so when you start to think about that, it's like, yeah, did we become champions? Absolutely. But it wasn't champions on the course. Like the lessons that he would instill in us each and every day, it just goes to show you how just the epicenter of like energy, right? If you look at epigenetics, how often do you see so many successful teams have either negative effects later on where people are just crippled and then having problems, and then other ones where, like the whole entire team's thriving. Like I just think that's a really cool concept to think about.
You nailed it. I mean, when I get a call back, when I get in touch with somebody and I go, hey, what are you doing now? And they're like, oh, I'm in the Naval Medical Program at Columbia University. And thanks for teaching me about perseverance. I'm like, wow. I mean, this kid's going to become $1 million doctor, and I'm thinking, can I get like 1%?
That wouldn't be very athlete centered.
But no, I mean, I'm not all the way there yet. But I mean, but it's extremely gratifying to hear where people have ended up, and then to have them reference something that they learned, on a tennis court that helped them. So we should probably get on to number 3, huh?
Do it. Move on.
Okay, number 3. Everything they do is developmentally appropriate. So I was just editing an interview that I did with Mark Kovacs not too long ago, and one of the highlights from that interview was when Mark said that 80 to 90% of what you see on YouTube is wrong, and it's not because the exercises are bad. It's because the people executing them are doing them in a way that is not developmentally appropriate in terms of execution or intensity.
Yeah.
So if you're out there watching and you love those videos of a 4-year-old doing plyometric exercises because they can, good for you. But that kid's going nowhere. And so it's a really interesting thing of people prescribing professional level exercises on prepubescence, and I mean, and that's the worst case scenario. But I mean, early on as a coach, I did some stuff with training that was over the top, and I was hurting my athletes. And when I stopped doing it, they were angry with me.
Yeah.
They were mad because they felt I'd gone soft. And I'm like, no, I'm just smarter. So anyway, somebody just sent a little comment or question. But anyway,
Bill, give us an example of that, because I want coaches out there to kind of like feel that and understand it. From where you thought things that you were doing maybe have been like wasn't working to the best, and then how did you get the information, obviously from Omni and other things, and you just studying because that's who you are. But give a couple examples of like where you were at and maybe where you are now, how you transition that.
Well, I mean, I noticed that my kids were getting hurt. We'd have hamstrings and sore shoulders and
Really good for that, by the way.
oblique injuries, and they were just coming up hurt, like off. And then I'm like, all right, well, you got to chill, right? I mean, and I still joke about this with the parents. I go, hey, at the parent meeting, I say, I'm not going to kill your kids, but I'm going to take them to the edge of death.
Ooh, I like that.
So now, but I've learned how to take the intensity up to the level that's before injury.
Mm.
Yep. And so, I don't know, it's hard for me to describe. I think part of it is just the ability to observe what's happening. You start to see the fatigue in an athlete, on the field or on the court, and then you go, okay, it's time. Now that we've gotten to that fatigue state, stop, right? I mean, I've known for a long time that you don't lift to failure.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's a key thing. So I think it's really the power of observation and seeing what is the state of your players, and how do you know when they're going too far. So hard for me to describe. You are far more qualified to give details on that.
No, I really like when somebody tells their principle or idea, if they can put a story for the person to watch or see or be able to connect with and say, oh, okay, I actually can use that and here's how. So that's why I wanted to kind of go there. Okay, so what's our next principle and characteristic?
I better go look. All right, so gotta go away for a second here.
Oh, good.
Hey, there's an appropriate time and place for all things. So a little story about the writing of the book. It originally was an 80,000 word book, and I had finished it, and it was ready to be published, and it was actually edited completely. Then I had a conversation with Scott Ford, who's one of the founders of Omni Athlete, the Future of Sport, formerly known as the SEC, Sports Consciousness Group, Sports Energy Consciousness Group. Well, anyway, in our conversation, we were talking about the future, the past, the flowing present, and the absolute present. And so we can live our lives sort of in the zone if our absolute present is in tune with our flowing present.
Yeah.
When we carry things from the past, that's almost always trouble. When we try to bring the future sooner than it will naturally occur, that is almost always trouble. So you see a lot of athletes who believe in redemption. I don't believe in redemption in sports. If you lost yesterday and you win today, you still lost yesterday. There's no makeup. But a lot of people carry that around. I mean, I think I see that a lot in baseball. In baseball, if you make a bad play in the field, you better get a hit in the next inning.
That's a good point. Yeah, no, you're right.
And how often do you see that a player will try so hard to redeem themselves? Either they strike out with a man on second or whatever, and then they'll make a dazzling defensive play, to try to make up for it. But that's the culture of baseball is very interesting in that way. So it's about the here and now. The work is always done now, right? And a lot of people, especially parents who want their kid to get a full ride to a D1 school or become a pro, they're so anxious to bring the future sooner that they will sign their kids up for human growth hormone
Yeah, I know.
and steroids and, you know, whatever. They'll look for a chemical advantage, or they'll sign their kids up for a program that they know tortures the kids,
Yeah.
and is over the top, and there's a risk of injury and all that. And and there's a genetic part of it too. I mean, the greatest athletes sort of seem to be born in these indestructible bodies that give them the capacity to do these things that normal humans cannot do,
Well, I think
right?
you have definitely have that, but you have the talent side, you've got the genetic side, and then we've got this like, now quantum physics epigenetic side, right? And so, the way that I look at it is, all these parents can try to press to try to, increase the level of their kid. But in reality, there's 4 developmental points that if we can hit those, like say as your kid's growing, if we know when to create speed and we know when to create efficiency and we know when to create consistency and then power, now we can create a rocket ship. But what a lot of these parents don't understand is that these neurodevelopment patterns and how we actually work with these kids as they grow, if we miss one of those things because we're so focused on another one later on, then now they can only be a jet fuel. Well, if we miss that one, then they can only be a car fuel and it's like regular, fuel. And then if we miss that, they're a diesel. And now you got these diesels walking around at like 15, 16 years old. They're like, let's go ahead and try to make you into an amazing athlete. Well, you've missed all these developmental points along the way.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
where we're going to see.
Let me jump in on that one. All right. So here's a nice little anecdote. All right. So seizing on the opportunity of where we are right now, I'm posting a lot of stuff about my courses that I have, online courses people can take. And
Yeah.
one of them is how to get your players to the net, which is a severely undercoached thing, right? And so
Yeah.
I have this system that takes people through a complete holistic program of progression and regression to give the players confidence to go forward. So, so I got some affirmation from some people, and then one guy says, "Well, you think someone can become the top 10-year-old player in the nation by coming to the net?" And I'm like, "Nobody cares how good you were when you were 10."
I'm 100% on board with this.
Yeah, no, and I was, maybe among my friends, I was the worst athlete at 10 years old. I was clumsy, uncoordinated, had zero confidence in myself. I was just plain a horrible athlete, and no one would call me successful at age 10,
Yeah.
but I became a decent athlete later on. I had to overcome some of the hurts and hangups from the abuse that I took for being so horrible.
Yeah.
Um, and I was almost always the worst player on every team I played on, but I kept at it, and then I became a decent athlete to where I could play pickup basketball in Oakland and surprise some people.
Yeah.
People, sort of, so there was an interesting thing. So the process, right? We have to go through the process, and this early talent ID thing is for the birds, because I particularly suffered from that. I was never identified early as being athletically talented.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
think
yeah,
that's also why our sport's dying right now in a lot of ways. Is because we're doing talent identification, so we're taking who we think is good at where they're at, and we're losing all of these kids if we would just, because there's biological and chronological age, right? Let's just talk about that for a second. A
yeah,
lot of people don't realize like there is biological and chronological age. So your kid may be 13, but they still might be a 9-year-old. You know what I mean? They haven't hit that next point to be able to grow mentally and physically. And so this is a big concept that we actually have to start thinking about from the coaching perspective, because I love Dr. Obviously, he's my boss and his mentor, and he always tells this story about talent identification. If we did talent identification in sport, like say if we're in we go into high school, for instance, or we go into like the school, and everybody starts out, and we only talent identified all the way up to grade 12. We'd only have like 3 kids in the class. Because like, you know what? You have to have an A. The rest of you, you suck, go away. Like, we're not even gonna worry about you. And if we did that, just think it, and that's kind of what we do in some of the sports that we're talking about. Instead of being like, okay, just don't suck. Like, have fun with this. Enjoy it. Like, let's actually like have a good time doing this. Make it fun. Make it athlete driven, like you're talking about, and then bring in these other aspects to life. And that's really where we see a lot of these kids around 15, 16, 17 that come out of nowhere because they've been getting groomed and built and they're processed right. And they don't sport specialize. I think that's a big key thing too.
Yeah, like I had this kid joins the tennis team. He was a skateboarder and he did every extreme sport. And now he's on my tennis team and he's 6'3", 190. He's just ripped,
Yeah.
right? And he hits 125-mile-an-hour serve. And he's got a humongous forehand. His backhand sucks, but we dealt with that. And you know,
Okay.
we had to give him a second serve. But you know, I tried to get somebody in my local section to take a look at the kid because I mean, he was hungry, he was motivated, and he had all the tools to be, you know, easily a D2 college player, if not higher, if not somebody would take him on as a project. But the kid was a specimen, but he
Yeah.
didn't really playing tennis until he was 15, and no one would look at him. You know, I had another kid who, through the vagary of the ranking system, was sort of locked out from becoming top 20, even though his game was good enough from that, because they had this tiered thing where this season you had to win this group in order to advance to the next group to win that one to get to the next one. So if you didn't start 3 years ago, right, then you couldn't matriculate up.
Yeah.
So, I mean, he was ranked number 62, and he took the number 1 player to 3 sets, losing 7-5 in the third, and gave that kid all he could handle. But
Yeah.
he's ranked number 62, and he doesn't get a sniff. Nobody will look at him because of his ranking. So anyway, but really the point, I think we went a little bit off the point because it was really about doing the work in the present and you know, keeping our eyes on what we can do now, because the present becomes the future.
Yeah, I think this is exactly
And
what we were meant to do.
let the past go. Let the past go. Whatever adversity you had, learn from it and let it go. Work in the present. Avoid the temptation of trying to make the future come sooner. It just won't. And
Yeah.
you'll only find harm doing that.
Cool.
So then it brings us to the last one.
Yeah.
Right. And it's related to the fourth one, and that is the focus is on an enjoyment. And I say enjoyment, and I don't say fun. Because I think it's a very fine line between teaching people how to enjoy sort of the work of getting it done and finding joy in that,
Yeah.
as opposed to rolling the balls out and going, all right, kids, do whatever you want, right? Hey, coach, can we play a game? Yeah, sure. Is it a fun game? Let's play it, right? Whatever's fun for you, kids. So I never have fun as a goal. Fun is a byproduct.
Okay.
Fun is a byproduct. Fun will happen. It's a spontaneous thing. It pops up every once in a while. And even when you're enjoying it, it still might not be fun.
Yeah.
So, you know, and then, you know, one thing that I always do though, well, I mean, about 95% of the time or more, we will end our practice with something that I know the kids like.
Mm-hmm.
But then also it's strategically set up so that there's value in it.
Yeah.
So, you know, when I do large group games, it's fun, it's crazy, it's chaotic, but it has a skill that needs to be used. And there's a training aspect to it. There's some kind of conditioning aspect. So I'm fooling the kids into learning a skill and conditioning, and they don't even realize it because I'm keeping them moving, and all they register in their mind is that it's fun.
Yeah.
And then very late in the year, I'll do some just absolute ridiculous things where there's absolutely no value to it, but it's just fun. It's just crazy fun. Like, 3 or 4 times towards the end of a season, we'll play tennis volleyball, which is the stupidest game ever. But it's pee your pants fun, and it's a great way to celebrate the end of the season and take a load off the mind. So yeah, I mean, finding ways to create some enjoyment, but there are things that are gonna be not fun. When we're doing spider runs, those burn and you hate them. There's no way around it. If we're sprinting, it's gonna hurt and you're not gonna like it, and there's no way around that. And if you have to stop and listen to me lecture for a minute or 5 minutes on something, you're not going to enjoy it. It's okay. I'm going to try to make it as brief as possible.
Yeah.
I'm going to try to engage as much prior learning as I can, so I'm not telling you the same thing over and over again. I'm going to let the kids say what they know already, and that makes it more fun for them if they get to be the teacher.
Yeah. I think it's one of the greatest things I love about rugby. I got to work with rugby for quite a bit. And, the coaches, we have practices obviously a couple times a week. They go through plays, they go through all the situation. But the one thing I love about rugby is when the whistle gets blown and the ball gets kicked, coaches are hands off the whole entire game. The athletes are making everything work. They're knowing their plays. They're running the system. And so it's almost instilling that coach within inside the athlete as well, right? Because I think that's one thing a lot of times that, from the highest level or even like an amateur that's trying to compete, is that they get in their head and they're like, well, no one's here to coach me right now. Well, in reality, if you actually pay attention to who a great coach and what they're doing, they're teaching you the lessons and values. So you're coaching yourself during those moments. And with tennis, an isolation sport, right? Like, let's think about it. Like, unfortunately, we have some of the most depressed players on the planet, because it's hard to break the top 100. They're grinding out at these different tournaments. You've got all these kids like playing all these different tournaments every weekend, and to come back to it and say, okay, well, how can we instill them with the tools? I think you've got a really, really great thing here. So tell us about where they can find your book, how they can learn more about you, take more of your programs.
Yeah, and if we've got some time for questions, if anybody, I don't know how many people are watching, I can't see that, but if we had, I think we had some comments people made. But anyway, the book is, let me get this right here. It is The Athlete-Centered Coach.
Yep.
It's on Amazon, and people can reach me at 720degreecoaching@gmail.com. And so one thing I always tell people, if you've ever bought a book from me or have purchased a course or whatever, I make myself available to you. So if you have a question or a comment or whatever, you have a problem that you need to solve, anybody can have a free 20-minute consultation. And there's a lot that can happen in 20 minutes. So, unfortunately, I can't give away hours and hours of time, but I will give you a very concentrated 20 minutes of my time, and we can solve a problem for you in your program, or you're in coaching, or with a player, parent, or whatever it is.
Well, I hope anyone that's listening, like, you really take that seriously right now. Like, we have 2 weeks possibly, in quarantine at the moment. Like, take the time and purchase some of this stuff. Take a course, take an online course, whether it's Bill's or anything else, and take somebody like you up on their offer. Like, I tell people all the time, like, I'm willing to give you time, and I'm amazed at how many people don't ever take it.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait a second, I'm literally offering you opportunities to come to California. And anytime that you're there, you're welcome to stop by. If you've got a major situation, call me. I'm not going to charge you. But I love that you just said that, Bill. So I hope that you guys take him up on that. And more importantly,
I just want to say this about that. And the problem there is ego. All right. So those people either don't value themselves enough, or they value themselves too much, or they don't value you enough, or they value you too much.
Yeah.
So if they just went, okay, we'll everybody see right now, I'm definitely benefiting from spending this time with you.
100%. I agree.
And I hope that you're benefiting from this time with me. So when 720-degree coaching is an infinity symbol, and it's believed that the infinity symbol is when two circles come together. So when whole people come together to collaborate, that's when the magic happens.
I love it. Well, Bill, as always a good time spending time with you. Thank you for taking the time to be on our virtual Brain Trust. It was an honor to have you as our first one, man. I'm grateful. And more importantly, let's catch up more. Let's pick another topic and go deeper.
I'll do it again. I've got almost nothing to do this week.
All right,
Every
brother.
me has been canceled. So
I appreciate you.
I'm here in the Bay Area where we're on practical lockdown. We're in shelter in place here.
Well, stay safe, and we'll be in touch.
Take care.
Thanks, brother.